train to Dhamma, everyone, or evening, as it.
Good morning.
Morning, Sal. How are you?
I'm fine. Now I'm driving. I'm on the way to take my daughter to her school.
Okay.
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 Hi, Anne.
Hi.
Are you having your injections in Canada, Anne?
Probably the end of April or early May. They've started doing them by age. So this week, I think anybody between 70 and 79 can sign up. And I don't know how many weeks after that the appointment will be, but we're behind a little, but we're going to have enough. We're going to do it.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm figuring probably another 6 weeks of hanging tight here.
Yeah.
Staying close to home. Have you had any, Sarah and Jonathan?
Yes, we've had one and we have the second one just before we leave, which is good for the travel.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. There's going to be a 3-month gap here, 3 or 4 month gap between the first and the second. And that's in order to spread the vaccine around faster so that everybody gets a first dose.
I think it's quite sensible because I think there's quite a high protection after the first one.
Right.
At first, we
Canada
thought it
doesn't have
would
any
be-
manufacture facilities for the drug, so all of it's imported, and that's what's slowing things down. Anyway, we're moving along, and we're fine. We're good. All things considered.
Just check. Jan, are you here now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Sawadika, Ajahn.
Yes. Sawadee
ส
ka.
วัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับอาจารย์ครับ
Sawadee krap, Ajahn.
สวัสดีครับ
Are you ready are you ready, Ajahn? Shall we start
Yes,
now?
please.
Does anyone have anything they would like to bring up today?
I do. And again, it's a situation with family where I've been thinking a lot about compassion. And I'm wondering, Ajahn, if you can speak a little about compassion. It was very useful last week hearing you talk about kusala jitas and how there are many jetasikas and factors come together for kusala jita to arise. And I was hoping you'd be able to talk about compassion in that way.
That is only theory, talking about anything. But the point is that if there is no understanding of no I, there cannot be anything better. Because you see that there are conditions for akusala, conditions for akusala. So how can anyone stop the arising of akusala? Because the conditions for akusala are so much. That's why learn to understand the truth is the only way. Each word will bring about the understanding, which will lead to the eradication of anusaya. And as long as anusaya is there, it's impossible not to have moment of akusala.
Yes.
So no matter we talk about anything, it's I who listen and try to do, but actually it depends on understanding. When there's the understanding of yourself, little by little, there can be more metta to those who do not have chanda to listen to the truth, to understand it as no one at all, because no one can have anything at will, to have metta at will or whatever at will at all, but learn to understand about the reality which cannot be taken for self or me or friends or family, because all are different realities arising by conditions only. That's the way to develop panya, the path leading to the eradication of akusala. Because as long as the anusya is there, it has to be this way. Because you see that we meet this life, but what about past life and next life? Who knows? To be this person only in this life, this personality, no more at all. So what will be for the condition for the next moment in next life has to come from this moment. As long as the idea of self is not completely eradicated, but it can develop little by little to understand the other who doesn't have any chanda to understand the truth. But while we have some chanda, interest to understand the truth, but still there are so many conditions for akusala to arise. At the moment when we just wake up, it's there already. Until fast asleep, see, it's there. That's why as we is just like this, the other is exactly the same. Compassion to those who do not have any understanding of the truth, because even those who study and have some understanding of the truth, still, as long as anusta hasn't been eradicated yet, there must be condition for different unexpected level of akusala and kusala to understand the truth, that actually they are only different dhammas in a day, from life to life, that's all, until the reality now appears better and to well enough to understand its truth, as it's not there anymore. No one at all, nothing at all. Only that which is there. See, the way to have compassion is to understand the truth that actually there is no one at all. Different realities, conditioned, and for the unwholesome realities, there should be compassion to those who, how long will it take to understand the truth? Maybe not at all. Like years and years ago, when we were there, see how much understanding. But that can be developed, and we cannot have anyone to do this and that at all, even oneself. One cannot stop having such and such an reality, wholesome or unwholesome, see. So what the others, exactly the same. For those who do not have any understanding, we should have compassion and try to help them as much, to be good to them. It's one way to help them, not to have more akusala, and to see that to be good and to do the good is better than anything else at all.
Mhm.
For both, for us and for the others too.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, otherwise, with our understanding, how can there be compassion? That is the such and such person, such and such action, such and such word. See, useless because it's all gone. Everything cannot stay at all. Whatever is there, completely gone. But sanya remembers. And when it remembers as someone, there must be attachment or aversion and whatever, kusala and akusala. But they are just once in samsara, that's all. And the not understanding the truth, the ignorance grows and grows on and on and on and on. Any moment when there's no understanding. That's why when understanding how difficult to understand the truth, we have compassion to anyone and not thinking about anyone's words or deeds at all, because they are all gone. What is there now? It's one's own ignorance or understanding with akusala, with kusala. That's why panya can be conditioned for the development of speech and deeds as well as understanding too. When we talk about hiri ottappa, see, at that moment when having no compassion, it's there. That's why any word which has heard and on and on and on, more and more and more, can be conditioned to just think about that. And later on, it can lead to directly understanding that as no one knows self, as we have learned. Having compassion for anyone who do not have any understanding of the truth. If there is understanding enough, such and such happening will not arise at all. All depends on conditions. As we cannot stop with akusala oneself, what about the other who do not have any understanding of the truth at all? It has to be such, and we have compassion for those persons who do not yet understanding the truth. Because ignorance and akusala has been accumulated so much that it can condition any kind of speech and deeds.
This is helpful. It's important anyway, but I find it particularly so what you're saying when from previous discussions that the person that towards which there's Lopa. I would be wonderful to be able to feel more compassionate, and I know that's wishing and that's self-wishing and everything else. But when the person, the other person is, that person is not interested in the Dhamma. Yeah, you're right. Just try to, being helpful and doing good, helping them, I guess, and is the best you can is what you can do. But it's also good to be reminded that compassion involves understanding that other people, all people, it's the same as ourselves. Nama rupa. It's just jittas as well.
And when they have a kusala moment, what about one's own hiri and ottappa at moment of not having kusala towards them? See?
Yes.
This is the most important, because no one can know the other's accumulation and the words and what he talked, the way he talked, but one's own. What we learn about hiri and ottappa? They are not self, they cannot be controllable at all, but their conditions, and panya is there to understand that very moment. If there's an I, there must be hirika and ottappa. But when there is just a reality, it's ugly or it shouldn't be that way. Hiri is there already and change everything.
Yes.
And I think realistically and in practical terms, it's likely that the kusala moments of compassion are very intermingled with agusala moments.
Yes.
Because when we notice other people suffering, which is the basis for compassion, that's going to be a condition for some aversion on our part also.
Sure.
And when it's a close family member, that's going to be a condition. We know that attachment involved also. But I feel that we shouldn't be too concerned about how pure the compassion is, because, as I say, it's bound to be intermingled with our kusala. That's because of our accumulated tendencies. But the more that understanding of the Dhamma has been developed, the more, skillful the compassion can be. And there's also, of course, a condition for equanimity, because one appreciates that other people have certain accumulated tendencies, and so there's a limit to what they can understand in terms of what we'd like to share with them. So all these factors come into play, but one knows that, as Ajahn says, that the more understanding there is, the more one has compassion for it, all other beings, because of lack of understanding of moment-to-moment realities, in addition to situations that may arise with family members from time to time.
Yeah.
When it's more obvious that there's some suffering on their part.
Yes, this is actually a sister I'm talking about, and it's very difficult. She'll talk about, things just rumbling in her head, like feeling like her head's going to split open, and she tries to control it and says, stop it, stop it. And it's been very, it's just, well, I have said a few things about sometimes, you really, I don't think I've done it well, but this, I'm just trying so hard to control it. You just think, oh gosh, but it's difficult because
one feels quite helpless in a way. There's a limit.
That's right.
One can do in that case, because accumulated tendencies are very strong. So if a person has like mental health issues, for example, it's extremely difficult to actually be of any direct assistance, and one wonders whether to give conventional support or Dhamma support or that kind of thing. But again,
so true.
There's a limit to the what can be done.
Yeah, and that's when there's so much attachment to the person concerned, and still have a lot of wish to help, wish to do. It's very hard to watch, but then again, that the more understanding there is, the more understanding that these things are all conditioned, and it's only understanding that will help. And when there's reluctance to hear, then I think just being kind and helpful is probably the best way to try to handle it.
Everyone responds to kindness and understanding, and sometimes one can just make some little comments that may help a little. I have a niece-in-law who has a lot of problems. She won't leave the house and may go months without leaving the house. Gets very nervous and depressed. But we just have very little chats on Facebook, and I just encourage her, okay, forget about what's happened and last year, and just about begin again, and like a toddler, one's bound to fall over and have problems, but just gentle encouragement that what's gone, it's gone, and how about now, and she kind of responds, but it's just little words, and but I think that what anyone responds to is the kindness.
That's apparent.
We get upset, which of course is the near enemy of compassion. It doesn't help at all.
Right.
Feeling sad or showing that you're upset doesn't help the one who's in trouble or sick.
Right.
And I think on the general point of compassion, like there can be compassion for those with no understanding, but even for those with a little understanding, like those of us here, everyone is caught in the dark chain of causation of
for sure.
life and death, and over and over again, and the same issues coming up again and again. So whoever one's with, actually they're going to be the same problems in life again and again and again, and the frustrations and the difficulties. So any understanding can condition compassion, whoever one's with. So now one may not be with one's sister or the niece, but one's with other people. So everyone has difficulty in understanding the truth. So there can be compassion anytime in this sense.
Yes, yes. Thank you. This is helpful to discuss it.
Yes, well, it's good to mention it, and because obviously it's a condition for a lot of concern and frustration, and one would like to help, and sometimes it is just as Jonathan mentioned, time for equanimity. Sometimes one may do one's best and it may not have any effect. And
well, it certainly makes a difference.
Life is so difficult for so many people. Yes.
Yeah, certainly makes a difference during conversations, and in this time it's not face to face, it's always phone. Certainly tell a difference in the quality of the conversation, where there is, there are conditions for kindness. Yeah, she'll talk a bit more then about what's really happening.
And as Jenny said, it comes back to this moment, like all those conversations I used to have every day with my mother when, with her dementia, but it comes back to the chitta at the moment when there's kindness and genuine concern for the other, rather than thinking about one's own dismay or disappointment. It makes such a difference.
Yeah. And I think the other, well, in my situation, the other can tell when that's happening.
They can tell, yes. And sometimes just listening is a help, just being there.
Thank you.
So we are talking about dhammas, see, very, very daily dhamma, that we do not take it or think about it as dhamma because of the accumulated tendency, ready to think, ready to say, ready to speak in what they are accumulated. But you see that instead of stop it, understand it. See, because whatever is now appearing is to understand as it is. That's why we can talk about anything, because they're all dhammas. And it can condition more understanding of the actual reality, not just we are talking about, which is not there at that very moment, no matter what.
Yeah. Yes. Certainly, there's no, I could see that until the realities appear, they're not hidden, which long way off. Yeah, one can consider it.
And even when we're talking about the daily situation with understanding, each word which is understood is conditioned, and it can develop and lead to the path realizing the noble truth. It has to be from now, any moment of understanding of at any level, developed on and on and on. And this is why and what we usually forget, that the path is so very subtle, because it is this moment, not the moment of sitting somewhere and trying to think about Dhamma, but to understand whatever is now as Dhamma.
Yes.
And this is the subtlety of how deep the path is, because nobody knows that even right now it is the path when there is understanding of this moment, no matter at what level it develops on and on, little by little. Otherwise, we don't know that now it is parami too.
And as usual, I think, Anne, we think the problem is like the sister's difficulty or one's niece's problems, but actually it's always the lack of understanding at this moment that's the real
Yes.
problem. So
Yeah.
it always comes back to now taking the Dhammas for people and things all the time and just not understanding, seeing now the
Yes.
unhappiness now, the difficulty now. So it's always back to understanding now. And
Yes.
the
Without that,
understanding conditions the confidence that what is most helpful is the understanding. Because
yes.
we think in terms of what I must do, but actually the understanding leads everything in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. For sure. Without the understanding, well, there'll be all sorts of interesting suggestions thrown out about what to do, but none of them will be
It's
hitting
all
the
about
point.
me and all about her and what one
That's
should
right.
do and what one shouldn't do and what course
Yeah.
of action. But it has to come back to the understanding now. We're so fortunate to have an opportunity to consider and develop that understanding.
I've noticed sometimes when, well, in this situation, certain things have been neglected for a long time to the, to the point of being damaging for one's health and living. And as soon as start thinking, I realize as soon as start thinking, oh, she should, or we should, the other sisters do this and that, I just think it suddenly occurred to me, oh my God, this is so much mana. someone should do this, not do that. And
who knows what conditions will bring what results at any moment. We're so used to thinking that the action will bring the result, or but who knows
not necessarily
what karma will bring what result, or what will be the effect. And
right, all big stories.
All big
the
stories
mana,
about what is right and what is wrong and what they should be doing, as you say.
Right. And the mana is just a big story too, until one really knows mana. Yeah.
And it has to be at this moment, because that's the only time it can be known, when it's there, when it arises.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good points.
Again, thank you. This is helpful, very helpful to discuss it.
It's good to bring up daily life topics.
And so this is the actual moment of studying Dhamma, because we know all about this, Citta and Cetasika, but not understanding the reality when it's there, see? But we just bring it to develop understanding of the truth in life. No matter what situation is there. There can be moment of direct awareness and understanding by conditions. So the daily life is the proof for how much understanding of what level of understanding Dhamma.
When we talk about wise consideration, that's not just thinking, obviously, but it's well, I guess I'd like to talk about wise consideration. It's of the moment, is it?
At moment when we talk about and you have understanding and you said thank you, see, it means that you understand what Dhamma is there, but not yet the direct awareness of that moment as not self. But it can lead to more understanding that this is the talking, the discussing about Dhamma, see, lively, see, because it's not just we think about Hiri and Ottappa and on, but at moment of talking correctly, rightly to the truth, there is Hiri, Ottappa and everything, and Chanda is there. But Chanda is not ready, not strong enough, not conditions enough to understand just one reality at a time. But we learn about all we are talking about. See, at moment of understanding, each moment. That's why that when there is more understanding, no selection, whether it has to be this topic only, but any moment of understanding the truth of reality, it is understanding at different level, which develops little by little. See, and this is so subtle because it's the path leading to understand that very moment as what is there, just one at a time, no selection is there. And the unnothingness of when it arises begins to think about it. Oh, we haven't thought about that before until later on and on and on when Panya develops, it understands more about what is there now. Only that, see? So now,
Yes.
so is this a wise consideration? Wise
Yes.
consideration at moment when there's understanding? But it's
Yes.
that because the idea of self is still there. Unless I let go the self more and more, there can be a moment of understanding what is meant. Wise considering whatever is there. No one is considering, but all dhammas, citta and cetasikas are there. Wholesome, understanding, different level, but it's so true. The situation is all dhammas. And at moment of considering and understanding, it's wise considering already.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. More, but more.
Otherwise, we try to find out what is wise considering, see? But it's there with
Yes.
the understanding.
I see. And understanding at any level, even if we aren't aware that there's understanding at that moment, the
Until the moment of direct understanding of that which is there, one characteristic. So one knows that when we are talking about realities, not anyone is the object of direct awareness and understanding yet. But when time comes, the conditions are ready. No one can stop the arising, just like thinking now. How can anyone arrange the way of speech and the understanding and so on? By conditions. That's why it is so natural to let go the idea of self, little by little. No one can just not having any understanding and try so hard to let go the idea of self. It's impossible.
no.
And when
I
we
used
talk
to
about
say,
parami, it is this moment as well. Kanti, to talk about it, to understand it at different levels. Begin to see what we used to take for my niece or my son or whatever as just a reality. Only there in this life as is next life, different. Who knows what would be? Son, a friend, or what? Unknown.
we can't know.
Just only this short life, so short. It can be as short as today or this evening. So the best thing is to understand the truth, to have more understanding, no ignorance about what is there as something and people.
Thank you.
And that so many reminders from the words of the Buddha. Life is so short. See, there can be more compassion.
Yes.
Even it's not there, but there can be moment of thinking about that little bit, and then the direct awareness is there when time comes or conditions ready. This is a way to let go. See, how can I let go what are there in this moment? See, Chitta or Cetasika. But the understanding develops so very, very secretly, unknown, like the accumulation of akusala, the tendency. And this is the understanding of Dhamma, not only the word, but when it's there or it's now. Forgot about Passa, see, about Ritaka, about what we have learned. Because at moment when there is direct awareness, no word at all. But understanding is that it is a reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also helpful to remember that we think that it's the strong clinging to my sister, my niece, my family member that's causing the difficulty, but really it's the strong clinging to oneself, because it is one's niece or one's sister. Like if it's someone else in the street, one doesn't know, there's no angst, there's no disturbance. So it's always coming back to the clinging to one's own feeling, one's own being, that's so important. And it's natural. You want everything in life to work out well for all those around one. So it's kind of like the complete opposite of metta and compassion when there is that disturbance from the clinging. So the more disturbance, the more clinging to oneself, the less metta and compassion there is in life, because there's no real kind consideration of the other's needs at those times.
Well, I've sometimes noticed that, when, as you say, when there's that disturbance, there's concern for the other person as much as there is concern about how I'm feeling. You know, among other things, you want to feel good that you've been able to do something and you can't. Yeah.
So that's why it's the opposite of understanding dhammas as they are, as conditioned, because one's lost in the story of my unpleasant feeling and how I can't do what I'd like and how the situation isn't the way I would like to control it at that moment. We think we can arrange life so well, and it's not possible, because no one who can arrange anything.
No, certainly can't. No, there isn't. Can't arrange your own. Certainly can't arrange anybody else's. Just the same as you can't arrange your own. Yeah.
And no one can stop having unpleasant feeling, and no one can stop having attachment, because they're conditioned. But they can be understanding.
Yeah.
Like even now.
Yeah. Only accumulated understanding. Well, like I say, this is helpful. Very.
And everyone sympathizes, because everyone has family problems or health problems or different issues and different problems. So it's the same, like Ajahn said, one situation, different dhammas, different disturbances, difficulties, clingings. So it's daily life, and it always comes back to this moment. The confidence develops with understanding that it is just about understanding here and now.
Does anyone else have things they'd like to raise?
Tao, you've been quiet the last few sessions. Do you have any points or topics you'd like to bring up?
I'd like to know what fatigue is. how fatigue or lack of energy is defined in Abhidhamma. This is rather sort of a selfish idea, but how can one cope with fatigue or lack of energy? Basically, it's my problem. So I'd like to know how I should view sort of my fatigue or my lack of energy. It's my question.
Have to be dealt with?
Yeah.
Does it need to be dealt with?
Yeah. Conventionally.
So we would like the present realities to be different to what they are.
Yeah, it's a wishful thinking, but there may be a way to cope with fatigue or lack of energy.
Well, for most people, it's a normal part of the ups and downs of daily life.
Yeah.
But if we think that it needs to be somehow, in terms of the understanding, if we think there's some aspect of understanding that needs to be improved upon or something like that, then there's a danger that there is going to be some kind of wrong practice.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to just consider whether, in terms of the development of the Buddha's teaching, there is anything to be done about it.
Yeah.
Of course, this doesn't mean that one ignores. If it's a health issue, then of course one seeks medical advice or some kind of advice about it. But in terms of the understanding of the reality appearing at the present moment, fatigue is just another way of describing a label or different aspects of feeling or of body experience through the body door or something like that.
And sometimes what one refers to as fatigue is dosa, when one's thinking about oneself and not liking it and thinking, oh, I didn't sleep and I'm too tired and this and that. It's just the story of I with dosa often. And sometimes we underestimate the value of kusala chitas. Like sometimes one may have slept badly and one thinks one's going to be so fatigued or tired, but one's busy helping someone else or sharing Dhamma and forget all about what happened because it's all gone anyway. There was one time when we were in Vietnam, Nina often refers to it, when several of us had had a disturbed night and I'd got an electric shock and been thrown across the room. And the next morning we were holding a Dhamma discussion, and I really wondered if I could manage. But after 5 or 10 minutes, I forgot completely about everything that had happened during the night. So I think that the power of kusala is the best best remedy for fatigue or any kind of difficulty or disturbance. Sometimes I've noticed Ajahn, she may start with some problem in her voice, but when she's talking about the Dhamma, it gets stronger and stronger. So I think kusala is always the best remedy for fatigue, whereas dwelling on it and thinking about it just conditions more fatigue, more thinking with dosa.
Yeah.
more wishing it's something else and not understanding it's just a passing Dhamma, just for a moment and then gone, never to return.
Yeah.
No use in dwelling on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because I myself noticed that when Constantine felt very tired, but her tiredness had completely gone once she started talking about Dhamma.
Right.
And that amazed me a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was
Okay.
one time in Lumbini, and I'd sat up all night coughing. I had flu, and we came down to breakfast, and everyone the next morning was saying, "Oh, you poor thing, have a rest," and so on. But Ajahn just said, "It's gone. What about now? It always comes back to now. What about now? When there's the thinking of poor me, I'm fatigued or I'm sick, it just conditions more and more akusala. What about just understanding it's gone, it's nothing, it's just passing dhammas, and no matter the fatigue or the compassion or lack of compassion, it's gone instantly.
Yeah.
It's just the story of I that it causes all the difficulties in life.
Yeah.
It's another situation, isn't it? And we often say that it's not a question of the situation, but of the realities that are appearing at the present moment to be understood.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
I've noticed that sometimes when there's situation fatigue or whatever that you're not happy with, and maybe you get up and wander around and then you think, oh, I did it. I figured that out. I just got to move. That also is by conditions. I think thinking of the getting through this situation, it's not you that gets through it. It does something to end it. That's, I think, the conventional way of thinking. But it's by conditions again. So I guess what I'm saying is there's two sides to that story.
Yeah.
There's the going through it and then it's all better again.
All right, another trap for mistaking cause, taking our action for being cause and result,
Yes,
which is not.
that's a better way to put it.
And it would also be wrong to think, oh, because it's just a passing Dhamma, no use in, no point in going for a walk or getting some fresh air. That would be wrong, equally wrong, yes.
Equally wrong, exactly, equally
each
wrong.
moment is conditioned, that's the truth. Would you like to add anything further, Ajahn, or anyone else?
Would you like to be enslaved on and on? Kuntadao?
No, no.
No. At that moment, are you not enslaved?
Yeah.
See, that's before there can be understanding what's the best thing in life. We are enslaved all the time to desire, just want not to be such or such. See, but what about the teachings of the Buddha?
Yeah.
What now? Otherwise, there must be the enlightenment to the master, attachment all the time. Just want and want all the time.
Yeah.
But when it does not appear, how can you know that you are enslaved? But the understanding is there, enslaved to ignorance. Again and again and again. That's why when we hear the word, but not you or me or anyone, but talking about the absolute truth of no one at all. And when there is the idea of something, there's no hiri or tapa at all at that very moment, because it is enslaved moment to desire or attachment. That's why listening to Dhamma and understanding what is there, it can be thinking fatigue or whatever is there, it's there for just a moment and then gone. But the idea of self follow it all the time. When will it be again? Or how can I do? And so on and so on. That's why this is the nature of the accumulation of akusala and attachment to whatever is there. That's why only panya, right understanding, can bring about the understanding of no matter what is that. Otherwise, there must be always ignorance of that very moment, as I all the time. But from hearing and considering and more confidence, anymore when there is the understanding of any truth, any reality, it bring about a just have more understanding, more confidence of the truth of no self. That's why when we study, we forget that it's not me who is listening, but at that moment it's a moment of understanding, a moment of hearing, a moment of wise considering. But we don't have to name or call it at all, because the first thing to be more confidence of the truth is to understand it as no me. So when it's not me, what is I? It's only that which now, even right now, experiences an object. Otherwise, one cannot get closer and closer to understand this moment as no self, as long as there is not enough understanding of that which experiences is there now, at moment of seeing. See, is it fatigue or what? Or just that which begin to have tanda, to study, to understand it as how can it be anything? Because it experiences, it sees now, it hears now, it thinks now. So there are more words to be of considering wisely about its truth as one. Otherwise, when follow the idea, the theory about how to get rid of this and how to get rid of that, again, see, not understanding at that moment who's the master in life, which they want to this way or this way all along. So to understanding the teaching is so very, very precious to begin to consider and to have more confidence. At that moment, all wholesome dhammas is there. It can be metta or karuna or panya or whatever is there, not akusala. Because in life, in the day, so many moments of akusala accumulated. So now it's like panya develops amidst the akusala. See, moment of seeing, no understanding. Moment of hearing, no understanding. So fast. That's why listen to understand that it's not me, no self, a reality. It's better than find the way out of that situation or that very unpleasant moment.
Okay.
Just to understand the most precious thing in samsara.
Yeah.
More of understanding, no one, no self, is the point of listening to the teacher. Because no other word can bring about the understanding of no one at all. It always things around this and that all the time. But the proof is that how much understanding or even moment of more interest, a little more interest to understand the benefit or the worthy moment of understanding reality as not self. This is a point, or otherwise we forget and we try to solve problem or not to have this or that. Like fatigue, see.
Okay, it's very clear. Thank you very much. It helps me a lot.
I think of fatigue as being somewhat similar to bad night's sleep, which also people suffer from. I know myself from my own experience. And it all comes down to akusala, the accumulated akusala of different kinds, including we have to say wrong view, because one is not living perhaps naturally. One is maybe trying to maybe trying to change one's way of thinking, or trying to work something out or something. Or it can just be accumulations of lobha and dosa. But whatever it is conditioned. And I think it's very helpful to keep that in mind. Of course, if there's a medical issue, then one needs to seek some assistance, as Sarah said. But if we're talking about just something within the ups and downs of daily life, then the less one allows it to take one's attention, then the better in that regard.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Kanachanka, I have a question about something that we spoke, or you spoke about on Saturday, and it was regarding, it says, is Jaku Prasada Rupa tiny? Visible object that impinge on it has to be tiny also. It cannot be the table or the flower. And then it conditions the process of experiencing that which appears now. So my question is, what is the it that conditions?
Can understanding be conditioned? Can ignorance be conditioned at different moments?
Yes.
Oh. So anything which is there is by conditions. Whatever arises has conditions for its arising. For example, seeing without the eye base, how can it be that which experiences which is not the eye base? And that which impinge on it, where is it? Just a moment, can it be a cup, a glass, a table, people and things? See, and this is how no one can imagine how very rapidly realities arise and fall away, no matter rupa and nama. See, but as we know from the Buddha's teaching that the rupa, the citta arises quicker than rupa. See, but that cannot be known because he showed us the process. Each citta which experience the same object, but different ones because of different characteristics, different power, and different function. See, who knows? As soon as we open our eyes, what are there? So many things. How come? Can they all impinge on the iris at once? But they're different. So only one is experience and the other one is experience. So we can know the difference, even the different color. See? And how many colors are there now? If one is in the dressing room, see the different colors of shirts and blouse and so on. Everything is so fast. So it's just like the magician who plays so very tricky. What is seen as not it is. Just one arises and falls away. Different ones together as something all the time. So Panya learned to understand each different reality. Even Citta is not any Cetasika at all. And each Cetasika is different from the others. See, to understand it actually, it cannot be taken for anything because it's there just very shortly and then gone completely. And this can be direct experience with understanding enough to understand that nature which appears. No doubt at that moment, see, While there is doubt all the time when we are talking about realities, talking about rupa, see, who knows that at the moment of seeing clothes, so many dresses, but each different one has a kalapa. How many kalapa for what is there? See, and that's why there is the idea of something all the time. And in order not to have the wrong understanding of something, it has to appear as it is, so very tiny. Because when they appear as a group, there is something there. That's why even one reality arises and falls away so very rapidly. What can be experienced is only the nimitta, because the rapidity of the arising and falling away of reality right now, just one by one. Who knows? But it can be understood in the beginning to understand the difference between that which experiences, because it's now there too, and that which cannot experience. What we take for whole and world and universe, there are only two different types, two different realities. One can experience and the other cannot experience. Even they are quite so different, but it has to be that which experience or that which cannot experience. No one there at all. And as Buddha has enlightened, he taught about the truth of it for anyone to develop right understanding, to be able to experience like him. That's why there are savakas in the Buddha's time, uncountable savakas, Brahma and Deva and human beings, see, because they have accumulated such long time of accumulation of understanding, letting go from the very beginning. Otherwise, there must be I who study. But actually, each word, when there is more understanding of not me, little by little from understanding, so it can appear to the highly developed panya, which let go enough of the idea of something. So at moment of seeing, there is no thing at all. Can there be anything together with moment of seeing, which appears as it is, that which experiences, not that which is the object of experiencing, just one at a time. Otherwise, the latent tendency of the idea of self, of thing, and vicikicca, doubt, cannot be eradicated completely, absolutely, no more in samsara. Because it has been accumulated quite so long, so how can it appear as it is without understanding enough to let go? Because they appear now, but no letting go at all. The sound, the hearing, the seeing, and that which is seen, thinking, like or dislike, just very surely, and then never to arise again. The truth is there, but the understanding is not enough. That's why I learn to understand that actually there's no me, no thing at all. Until reality can appear as it is, for more confidence of the truth, no change at all. So should we think about how many kalapa or what is there? But the understanding of the truth that it is only that which experiences, no matter the object is sound, sight, smell, or what, but that which experience is no one at all, no matter at any time, and what object is there. So study with Chanti and Virya, not just try to do, but right understanding is there. So the other parami is there too. with Panya.
So the
Rosita, back to the quote that you gave and the to and the it. I think it's referring to how there has to be the I sense which has already arisen for any of the citas in that process to arise to experience the visible object. And there has to be the visible object which has impinged on the I sense. That is the it, which is a condition for any of those citas in the process to arise. Without any visible object having impinged on the I sense, there can't be the sensed adverting consciousness, seeing consciousness, or any of the other citas in the process. So that is it, a vital condition for those citas to arise. And that I sense and that visible object have to have already arisen in order to be that condition for those citas to arise and experience the object.
Thank you, Achan, and thank you, Sarah. Sarah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The it is just what you said, the tiny visible object and the tiny pasada rupa, because if it wasn't that's the very basic reality, then the process of experiencing wouldn't happen.
It's I sense being conditioned all the time by karma, but if no visible object impinges on it, then it cannot condition those citas to arise. So there has to have been the visible object impinging as well. So two vital it's there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Achan.
For me, it's hard to understand that visible object is tiny, tiny. But what is more difficult to understand is that potapa aramana, tangible object, is also tiny. For me, there is an idea that a certain dimension, flat dimension of tangible object is required to see whether it is hot or cold, etc. So is it real that tangible object is also very tiny or not?
I'd like to have a go. Go on, Sikin.
No, we talk about nimitta and how just one moment it cannot condition thinking about what's seen and what's touched. So it usually arises many moments, one after the other, although each must have just that one reality as object, and it must be tiny. But in order to think about what's seen and what's touched, it has to be many moments in close proximate, close to each other. So I think that probably explains why if it's just one moment, it's so tiny, you wonder whether that would, it doesn't feel that it's just that, because in reality it's many moments.
What are there in Akalapa when we talk about Rupa? What are there in one Kalapa? And there are space in between each Kalapa. So how tiny it is. One Kalapa, many Rupas, Mahapatu Rupa, and that which can be seen is how little it is. That which can be seen as tiny as a Kalapa, right? So akasa in between. So whatever appear must be the nimitta of the arising and falling away of reality, because it arises and falls away in split second, much more than a split second. See, otherwise, what is seen, if it does not impinge on the eye base, can kita experience it as it seems like they all seen now, but actually only one moment of seeing. Each different rupa, so it called form as different shape and form, like a shirt or a blouse. See, not the same at all. So if each does not impinge on the eye base, can it appear? But as it arises and falls away so rapidly, it appears as something together. But think about the tiny kalapa with space in between the group of kalapas.
Better because I've turned the camera.
So we cannot imagine at all. Even vipassana jnana, sampatichana and other moments cannot appear. What appear is just natural daily life. But panya is there because it lets go the idea of self and think enough, the understanding of the truth of that moment, that what is that which sees is that which experiences, thinking about the experience, no shape and no form, and that which appear even is the nimitta of that certain rupa, but so many kalapas when it's rupa together. See, like sampatichana and santirina does not appear at all. That which the actual moment, which experience the vinyana is there, which experiences. See, and this is life that no one can know. And the Buddha, before he became enlightened, the parami had to develop so quite long in order to understand this as it is, much more than we can imagine and can understand, because our panya cannot be equal to the or the higher Savakara, Sariputta, and Moggallana, and so on. But the truth is that to really be the moment of the eradication of self, of things, it has to be stage by stage. And as is seen and think about now, it's not the moment when only one reality appears. So we don't think about the profoundness of what is meant by the Buddha's word. Just only one appear at a time. Otherwise, it cannot be the clear comprehension of reality as it is, as not self or anything at all. Just hardness. It can be I who sit or things around at all. So the truth appear to the highly developed panya, which let go from the very beginning to develop more understanding of no one and no thing. So even fatigue is a reality, no self at all. If there is still something in a day that cannot be conditioned to eradicate the idea of self, because no understanding of that, no understanding of this, no understanding of that. So how can doubt and the wrong understanding be eradicated? So one cannot underestimate what Buddha taught at all. Each word should be studied carefully because it's so true, and it can be directly experienced with higher developed panya stage by stage. So instead of thinking about this and that as usual, it can be a moment to be conditioned from understanding to even think about that instead of thinking about what we used to think in a day. So from the moment we wake up, is there any moment thinking about Dhamma? At moment of thinking, hardness, sweetness, color, everything appear. No understanding of thinking about it, even thinking about it. That's why it needs more parami to understand the truth. And this moment of understanding is accumulated to conditioned moment of thinking about it by conditions. So the understanding of no self and conditioned reality is much more confident, moment to moment, little by little. That's why in Tipitaka, the person who has most confidence in the Buddha must be the Aryan, the enlightened person. No doubt about what it said, only one at a time. When they are together, it cannot be clear comprehension of anything.
Yeah.
And thinking about one, no thing at all. Can anyone imagine? Impossible until it's there, no doubt. And that's the way to have less and doubt until it can be eradicated. Never again in samsara. Even before that, it's there all the time in samsara.
Ajahn, listening to what you're saying, I'm thinking about Satyayana, Kichayana, Katayana. And just now you mentioned the Aryan. The Aryan obviously has experienced Katayana, but I'm wondering whether the Satyayana, Kichayana also accumulates after one becomes an Aryan.
Is it enough just to have no wrong understanding at all? But there are so many other unwholesome.
Yes, so obviously it grows. Yeah. It has to grow. Satyayana has to grow.
Because you see that when we talk about the Satyayana, it means that the understanding, which is not the moment of direct experience. So no doubt about what moment is what Satyayana. Only the moment of development is Kichayana, and then the moment of Katayana. See? So after Katayana, it is as usual, and one listen and have more confidence of the teaching to eradicate more akusala which is left after enlightenment. Did Anatta Bindika go to see the Buddha at the Chetavana after his enlightenment?
Yes.
Because it's different from the moment of direct understanding, which is Katayana. And those who were enlightened already in the time of Buddha still have discussion about this and that among themselves. See? And then later they went to see the Buddha and asked him.
So Kichayana as Satyayana, Kichayana, and Katayana is not just the levels of understanding, but also the object of understanding, right?
Because you see that the level of those who haven't become enlightened yet must be different from Satyayana of those who have become enlightened at different stages. The Sotapanna, intellectual understanding, is not like the one who hasn't become enlightened yet, right? Stage by stage.
So even Ananda, when he listened to the Buddha, even after becoming a Sotapanna, it's still considering about concepts of realities, even though no wrong view at all. So cannot be Kichanyana and Katanyana all the time. So what about at other moments? Must be lots of just wise reflection and consideration about the aspects that haven't been directly known yet. And even for the arahats, cannot be katanyana at every moment. So it must be many moments of satchanyana and kichanyana too, but of course completely different from satchanyana like now.
Moments with panya and without panya.
When there's no more anything to do in life after becoming an arahata, what do they live for?
To listen more.
All good deeds, helping the others, sharing the understanding
Yes.
with citta, which is different from kusala, because they are kiriya citta, not conditioned to be born again. They are conditioned for each one to live by conditions. Kassapa, different from Ananda, different from Mokkallana, and so on. Anyone who understands the benefit and the precious moment of understanding will live with understanding, discussing, talking in the old days, no book to read. So all depends on conditions. Who knows that they are Sotapanna or Anagami or Arahata? Exactly the same as usual, but without kilesa. So one doesn't mind so much about what is there now because it's gone already. Less agitated.
Hi, Konsu-jin. This is not an important question, but I'm wondering whether there is a physical description of Sudawasa. I'd like to know what kind of place Sudawasa is.
Not here. Not now. What about just heaven?
But
I said, yeah, only heaven. This explains of heaven.
I do not feel that Sudawasa is the same as heaven. Heaven is a very pleasant place. Sudawasa doesn't seem to be very beautiful or very exciting because there are only 3 processes, mind, idle process, and ear processes. So, and those who are born there do not need any pleasant object. They do not eat, they do not drink. So I'm wondering what kind of place Sudawasa is.
Is there a moment in life now which is without a kusala? See, but it's not as high as that. For example, feeling. We are used to very, very little level of pleasant feeling.
Yeah.
From eating and experiencing and from the sensual subject. But what about moment when it's not the sensual subject, but it feels very pleasant without that? See, we have to think about different moments of different object of different degree, and that which is higher than that, it's not there to understand how great it is different from the pleasure with the sensual subject.
Yeah.
See, when it's there, it is not as before. Even the samatha bhavana, the jhana, see, the present feeling of jhana is different from present feeling from sensual subject at all.
Yeah.
But if one hasn't reached the stage of, how can that be object of experience? How different it is, more pleasant with no attachment to sensuous objects, see. And for the Sutava, much more than that, because it's always so natural and imagine. But it's there by conditions. Even present feeling is different in this life. The present moment, at moment of understanding reality, and the pleasant and enjoy sensuous objects is different, right? But it's not as great yet enough to be known of the different, far apart from this to that. So we know that when the attachment to sensuous object with calm, see, must be more than just present moment when understanding the truth of intellectual understanding. And the other pleasantness without sensuous object, when it's with understanding, even in this life, characterized by condition, which shows the difference between pleasantness to the object which is sensuous object and that which is not sensuous object. What are conditioned to arise must be different with different degrees of understanding. Only some moment or permanent moment which has eradicated the akusala of that degree. The great joy at moment of experiencing the sensuous object is much different from moment of understanding. And when it is higher understanding, the moment is different from the beginning. Each moment has to be unexpectedly to have confidence of paccaya or conditions to let go the idea of self.
So does Anagami, when he is born, he or she is reborn in Sudawasa? No.
Only those who have attained the fifth jhana, Anagami with fifth jhana only, can be born then. Without fifth jhana, they cannot be born in Suttavasa.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm. That's right. There must be only 5 Suttavasa.
Only anagamis can be reborn in Suddhavasa, but not all anagamis are reborn in Suddhavasa. I think it's a common misunderstanding, yes.
Ah, I thought every anagami is reborn in Suddhavasa.
Because not all anagamis have become enlightened with jhana as basis, let alone the highest jhana as basis. So only those are reborn in Suddhavasa, but no other beings can be reborn there, only anagamis.
Yeah, but anagami who hasn't developed jhana, where does he reborn?
How many Brahma planes?
Other Brahma planes, but not Suddhavasa.
So does anagami who is reborn in one of the heaven knows that he has an obligation of attaining arahataship? Does he have such self-awareness that he is obliged to attain arahataship?
It's not so much an obligation, it's just inevitable. It's going to happen.
So the anagami in what plane will become arahata?
By conditions, not by... By conditions because of the degree of understanding and the remaining tiny anusia to be eradicated, but not because he has an obligation, but it cannot be any other way.
But he must have a self-awareness that he is anagami.
Does he still have avijja and lopa of bhava, loba, raga? That's why Buddha told us about many different kinds of anagami, sotapanna.
So Tadao, more than you and me, he will know when lopa arises, when moha arises, and that it needs to be eradicated.
Yeah.
And no doubt or question that all clinging to sense objects, all kinds of dosa have been completely eradicated. So no doubt about the attainment of being anagami. No doubt of the work that is being done and what is left to be done.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a question about rupa, please. And if the visible object rupa, the kalapa, the visible object arises in, it's that visible object that's seen by citta, but it impinges on the chakku vinyana, chakku pasada rupa. So maybe this is one of those impossible questions, but what does the chakku pasada rupa consist of? It's obviously the 8 inseparables. Is there another? What part of the rupa does the visible object impinge on? Or is that an impossible question not to be answered?
Can we, Azita, can we say the chakku pasada rupa consists of something? It is another rupa of one of the 28. It arises with the Mahabhuta rupa, but it does not consist of anything. It's one rupa.
Just this one rupa Right. Arising in that kalapa would
Kalapa.
be 8, and it's another one, 9. And because it's conditioned by karma, there must be jivitindriya or rupa also. So there must be those 10. So the visible object just impinges on the eye sense rupa, even though it's arising in that kalapa and conditioned by the primary rupas.
Thank you. That's clear. Thank you, Sukin. Thank you, Sarah.
Just one of the group of tiny, tiny rupas. Yeah. And that's why it is a rupa, because it doesn't consist of anything. It is the smallest element that cannot be divided, cannot be consist of anything, just one tiny rupa.
Yes.
So
thank
it's just
you.
that tiny rupa that visible object impinges on, even though there must be the other rupas together with it in that kalapa. And if there weren't the primary rupas, it couldn't arise. So it's dependent on those primary rupas in that kalapa.
Right. Yes. Yes, I understand. Thank you.
How about visual object? What produces visual object? There are 4 conditions, but does karma produce a visual object or not?
Are you talking about the visual object inside or outside the body? Because if it's outside the body, it cannot be conditioned by karma. It can only be conditioned by temperature. But the groups of rupa inside what we call the body can be conditioned by temperature, karma, ahara, or chitta. And we know that visible object or color is one of the rupas that arises in every group, every kalapa of rupas. So it has to be conditioned by any of those conditions, depending on the kalapa it arises in.
But some time ago, I asked Kunsujin how there is a clear correspondence between pleasant visual object and kusala vipaka citta, and unpleasant visual object with aksara vipaka citta. And her answer was, it's determined by rupa, visual object. It means that it must be karma which produce a visual object.
If it is the visible object that's conditioned by karma, for example, if seeing sees a pleasant visible object, that seeing must be conditioned by karma, and it depends on karma. The result of karma depends on that past karma, which visible object is seen, whether it's the pleasant one or the unpleasant one. If it's a result of kusala karma, then it's a pleasant visible object that's seen. If it's a result of akusala karma, it must be unpleasant visible object that is seen. So visible objects are different depending on different conditions.
Okay.
Like even the rupas outside the body conditioned by temperature, the color in different groups is different depending on the primary rupas that have conditioned it, for example.
So in the example you gave, what is conditioned by karma is the eye consciousness that experienced the visible object rather than the visible object itself.
Visible object can be conditioned in any of those ways, because the visible object seen can be outside the body, so it's not conditioned by karma.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
It seems to me that two people could be seeing the same thing, as it were, and for one, it may be kusala vipaka, and for another, it may be akusala vipaka because of past conditions. So the visible object that is actually impinging could be of different nature. Just like two people can be experiencing the same body temperature, but same thing through the body door. But for one, it may be akusala vipaka, too hot or too cold. And for another, it may be pleasant, maybe kusala vipaka, just pleasant. It depends on conditions.
Yeah.
Sarah, just to be clear, when you say outside visible object that's outside, that's experienced, we're talking about things, right? But when we talk about seeing someone's complexion, what we take for someone's complexion, we don't know it. It can be any of the four.
It could be any of the conditions, yes. If one's looking at, like I'm looking at the water, one knows the rupas out there are conditioned by temperature, but the looking at one's arm, for example, the visible object, who knows what it is conditioned by at that moment to arise, cannot be known. Yes, could be any of those. Those connected with the body can be conditioned by any of the four causes, but those that are not connected with the body, outside the body, only by temperature.
Can anyone change the object which is experienced, no matter it's conditioned by what? Right now, can anyone change the characteristic of the object which is experienced? When it's unpleasant, can anyone change it to be pleasant? Impossible, because the pleasant object and the unpleasant object must be different. It does not depend on anyone's thought at all, that you like it or not. But even when it's not pleasant in its own characteristic, its own nature, but someone might like it. And even that which is pleasant, but by accumulation, someone might not like it at all. But no one can change the object at all. For rupa, it has two different qualities. One is unpleasant, and the other is pleasant, no matter you like it or not. But you cannot change the object. When it's unpleasant, it has to be itself as unpleasant, always, never change. Because actually it's conditioned to arise and falls away instantly. That's why no one can understand clearly whether citta, which experiences now, is kusala vipaka or akusala vipaka. But the truth is that when the condition, the karma, is unwholesome, it experiences the unpleasant object. And when the citta, the kusala karma, conditioned moment of vipaka, the vipaka experience the pleasant object, even after that, after seeing the javana, which has been accumulated, not to like that object at all, can condition to be such, not like the pleasant object. Because there are so many degrees and qualities of what is pleasant and what is unpleasant, but it cannot be told at moment of seeing. It has to be the moment. And so people, when they like, they think that it's pleasant. And when they do, and when they dislike, they say it's not unpleasant. But they cannot change the characteristic of the object which is there at all. Because the seeing is kusala vipaka. It sees or experiences the present object, no matter jhana, like or dislike of that object, can arise by conditions, but it cannot change the object which is seen by the seeing consciousness, or other way, the same. That's why it's impossible for anyone to tell, because even the flower, it looks beautiful, but look closely to each petal, just one at a time. It can be quite pale or wither or whatever is there as unpleasant, see. But the citta which sees, experience the pleasant object or the unpleasant object, no one can tell, because it just sees and then falls away. And like and dislike after the seeing moment, and by conditions, one might like that which the others do not like at all. Like some taste, some might like very hot, and some might like very bitter, and some might like very sweet. So sweet, it depends. Who tell that it is pleasant or unpleasant? It takes a long, long time, and it cannot be known exactly what it is. But one can understand, just not more than that the kusala kamma condition, the kusala vipaka, and the akusala kamma condition the moment of experiences, the unpleasant objects, not by one's own view, but by its nature.
Achan, can we put it this way, that when, for example, unpleasant visible object contacts the pasada rupa, and the eye-door adverting consciousness experiences the rupa.
Or the experience the same object, it cannot be changed. That seeing is unpleasant and the javana sees pleasant. It's impossible because it's the same object.
But I think it's hard to determine whether given visual object is pleasant or unpleasant. I still remember from almost 50 years ago, Dhammadhara's question. His question was, if Buddha was standing on a pile of cow dung, do you call it a pleasant object or unpleasant object? So it doesn't seem to be a clear definition of pleasant and unpleasant visual objects.
And that's the point that Ajahn was making. Like now, what is seen, no one can know whether it's at this very moment, whether it's pleasant object or unpleasant object, and it doesn't matter at all because it's just that object which is seen. Usually we think when there is attachment and a pleasant feeling that it must be pleasant object, but that depends on the accumulated tendency as to whether it's liked or not liked. What is pleasant for us is unpleasant for a pig, and vice versa. So who knows at each moment, like now, whether it's pleasant object or not.
And also the image of a person and the place they are standing is actually many, many, many different visible objects because they are so tiny. So some of them may be pleasant and some unpleasant.
Oh. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Moments of experiencing pleasant and unpleasant objects all the time, and different moments of attachment and devotion and ignorance all the time. But it's useless to even speculate about whether the visible object now that is seen is pleasant or unpleasant.
Yeah.
Usually people think it's important, but actually what's important are the chittas that arise in the jhana process, whether they are kusala or akusala. That's what is important. Because there can be understanding no matter what the visible object is. It's just visible object.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Just on your question again of fatigue. Fatigue can have a physical or a mental basis. So a physical basis would be something to do with nutriment or atmosphere, the environment, stuff like that.
Yeah.
As a mental basis, well, as I said, it's bound to be some kind of a kusala, and perhaps especially if we've talked before about expectations and how expectations are attachment to things being a certain way, but we also have expectations of ourselves.
Yeah.
Apart from expectations of situations and other people. So we have ideas of what we should or should not be able to achieve or to do. And I think all these things, and that has an aspect of wrong view to it, of course.
Yeah.
I think all these things can be a condition for different physical phenomena, experiences, including fatigue.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And what about when one's really sick, lying on one's bed, unable to move, or having a lot of medication and for one's illness?
Yeah.
Still, just realities which are conditioned, no matter what they're called, whether it's called fatigue or anything else. The dharmas are conditioned to be just the way they are. They can't be changed. But how wonderful to understand that it's just as it is at that moment.
Yeah.
And it doesn't last at all. It's just for an instant, whatever is conditioned right then and there and gone. And understanding can develop even at those times, even whilst lying on one's deathbed or any time. Still just passing dharmas which are anatta. And still the best thing is the understanding then and there, just like now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Jonathan,
what is the fatigue, the absolute reality of fatigue? What reality is fatigue?
I think it's kaya indriya.
Can the kaya feel?
Probably dosa, Ajahn.
Pardon? I cannot hear you. Please say
I would think.
it.
I think fatigue would probably be dosa.
And what is the real, absolute reality of fatigue?
Attach low karmasava or bhavasava, possibly one of the asavas.
Can it be rupa?
Certainly, Ajahn. That's a good question. I don't think it could
If
be.
it is rupa, what rupa is it?
What rupa? Oh, I'm not sure, Ajahn, on that at all.
That's why we have to find out the absolute truth of what we are saying. For example, fatigue, what is it? What is the nature, the absolute truth of it, the Dhamma of it?
I think it's kaya indriya.
You mean the body, the body,
Yeah,
the hardness, softness?
yeah, but indriya.
Can a table be fatigued?
No, no.
See, so what is the absolute truth of what we take for fatigue? If we cannot find out, it's something.
Yeah,
But in the absolute truth, what is it? Can it be feeling?
Oh,
See? Can it be sanya? Can it be manasikara? No, not at all. Only the feeling there, a kind of pleasant feeling.
oh,
So at that moment, it's not I, it's just that. Even
oh,
if we don't call it anything, it's there.
oh,
But it's not hot, it's not soft,
mm,
it's not cold, it's not sweet,
mm,
it's not sound,
mm,
it's not vitaka,
mm,
it's not sanya. See,
mm.
that's why I learn to understand the characteristic of that when it appears as a reality which experiences an object.
Oh. So it's domanassa.
Yes, anyone like it?
No.
See? So when at moment when there is dislike, what feeling is there?
Oh,
Because those can be at any time of anything, but not fatigue. You
oh,
dislike that sound or color or
yeah,
taste, but not fatigue, right?
yeah.
That's why when it's there, the understanding has to be no name, but the characteristic appear as it is.
Oh,
Any word cannot explain it clearly because it has to be directly experienced only and then gone.
oh,
And for the unpleasant object, no one can tell at all, but we can assume that it's unpleasant like corpse. Does anyone like to experience, to see it or smell it? See, that's why we can understand as it is unpleasant. But we cannot tell for anything clearly and absolutely. But for that, bad smell is unpleasant. Good smell is pleasant. See, harsh voice is unpleasant, and a harsh voice is not unpleasant. It's pleasant or pleasant clear enough? Not at all. It depends on the moment when it's there long enough or not. Otherwise, so sure that no one can understand it as it is. It's gone completely. That's why all depends on right understanding of the truth of that reality. It's not just saying that it's this or that by word, but when it's there, the moment of beginning to understanding as not self is to be because it's that which feels, it's that which remember, it's that which think. They are all that which can experience. So they cannot be taken for self or anything at all. Not permanent, just once in samsara and then gone completely. And this is point to understand a little more about what is there as it is, little by little, and it can be object of clear comprehension of that one by one.
yeah,
For example, when fatigue is there,
yeah,
it's just a kind of feeling,
yeah,
unpleasant feeling.
yeah. So the point is seeing each reality as it is.
Understanding the truth of its nature as it cannot be anyone or anything as we take it for quite a long, long time in samsara.
Yeah.
And this is the beginning to know how to learn and how to let go the idea of self.
Yeah.
Not only the word, but it's there. But the word tells us to understand that it's not self. For example, hiri, otapa, Chanda, Virya, see? It's all there, but it's not known without the teachings of the Buddha about each characteristic. And when there is a little more understanding of the characteristic, it can appear, see, because of understanding, understand it's there at that very moment.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they cannot be known at all what are there.
Yeah.
And when there's no understanding, it's I of something all the time, covered by the idea and ignorance about the difference between that which appears is not that which we take for something.
Yeah.
Little by little. And this is the path leading to enlightenment. So very subtle. Otherwise, the other way, which one tries so hard to go somewhere and try to develop it, it's impossible because not the understanding, stage by stage, little by little.
Yeah.
So I think it's time now.
Yes, Sawadika. Thank you very much,
Thank you very
Ajahn.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Sawadee-ka.
Thank you, everyone.
พี่ครับอาจารย์ครับ
Thank you. Bye, everybody.